Hello and welcome to The Menu, Monocle Radio's food and drink programme. I'm your host, Chiara Rimella. Coming up, we speak to restaurateur David Carter about the inspiration behind his globally minded venues.
There's people there that are better than me at running them, better cooks, better maitres, better sommeliers, whatever. They're way better than me at that, and I really enjoy the vision. I really enjoy kind of creating the process and coming up with a million ideas and somehow marrying it down into 30 dishes.
Also on the programme, we learn more about the ethos of Berlin restaurant Kanaan, founded by an Israeli and a Palestinian.
With time, with long perspective, I can tell you that there was some magic that happened in the moment. I'm always saying that the mission and the political aspect in a way has chosen us, and we never chose that.
Plus, our in-house wine expert Chloé Lake crowns her wine of the month. All that here on The Menu on Monocle Radio. Some restaurants are born out of an idea to bring a specific cuisine to a place, and others you can trace back to the moment when a chef or patron fell in love with a certain plate of food. Restaurateur David Carter may originally be from Barbados, but it's his travels around the world that have inspired the series of venues that he's opened across London. From barbecue restaurant Smokestack to Italian-leaning Manteca and his latest openings, Greek-inspired Oma and Agora, there's something else joining the dots in these kitchens. A passion for cooking food on an open fire in a laid-back, convivial way. As his most recent venture begins to sizzle nicely, we sat down in the studio to find out the challenges and rewards to running multiple and such different endeavours.
I think it's like a perfect accident, really. I think I'm from the Caribbean, so I grew up with outdoor cooking. I grew up with charcoal, I grew up on grills, oysters, fish fry, and so I think there was always going to be something that kind of centred around that. The Americana sort of smoke, the smoker kind of came in secondary after that. The more I fell in love with the brand, and I think the restaurants we do now are exactly that. I think they're really focused on the brand, so the experience when you walk in the restaurant, it feels a certain way, it sounds a certain way, it looks a certain way, and we go pretty hard on design. And then obviously the product has to be amazing. So that was Smokestack, and then Manteca came along, and a guy called Chris Leach, who's a really good friend of mine. The industry is very small, and he was like, well, look, I want to help doing a restaurant. And he helped me massively with Smokestack, and I was like, look, I'll tell you everything I know, I'll help you. And he's like, no, I want you involved. And I was like, Chris, what do you mean? He was like, can you be a partner? And I was like, well, yeah, I don't know what that means in English, but somehow we joined forces. And to be fair, we still have a handshake agreement, and it was very much that he does the kitchen side of it. I help with sort of, I guess, bringing the whole project together. So design is and creating it and bringing it to vision, really. And I think in latter years, I think now that the restaurants are pretty established, and my career has gone through different phases where I was maitre-led and I was operational. And I think now that I'm a bit sort of more settled in life, I really enjoy the creativity. And I think with that, creating restaurants, I find a lot more appealing than running them. Once the restaurant's up and running, it's great, but there's people there that are better than me at running them, better cooks, better maitres, better sommeliers, whatever. They're way better than me at that, and I really enjoy the vision. I really enjoy kind of creating the process and coming up with a million ideas and somehow marrying it down into 30 dishes or whatever it is. And so that's what Oma Agora came about. We went a trip to first time Istanbul, and that was amazing. And then through Greek islands, so Siphonos and, Crete and Milos and the rest of them. And came back like totally in awe. And I was like, you've got to be joking me. And the site is quite unique in terms of it's not small, but more than that, it's like the first floor is a lot bigger than the ground floor. So we had an idea for Oma, which means raw. So it translates into raw. So very focused on fish and crudos and really light and bright flavours and stuff like that. And then Agora means market, and it actually was inspired partly in Tel Aviv, to be honest with you. I was there one year for like New Year's. Again, all part of this whole travel for this concept, and everything was, I remember, it's just everything spilling out into the streets. All these shop fronts opened up, and it was a vibe. It was a really, really, really a hell of a vibe. And I was like, well, how do we kind of create that here? The Borough Market has 500,000 people a week, and I thought it was quite challenging to do if it was all one restaurant. I was like, that's pretty hard to do because like, what's downstairs? Is it a bar? Is it a cafe? I really don't know how to run a bar. I really don't know how to run a cafe. I'm okay at running restaurants, I guess. And then Agora kind of came about, and I was like, let's just open it up and just do something really sort of street level and open it up completely. And then upstairs will feel a little bit more, I don't say premium, but it's a bit more elevated, and it's bookings. So, when people make a booking, they have an expectation straight away. When you walk into a restaurant, what's your expectation? So I think they're completely different that way. And I think it became quite polarizing eventually, where we purposely took Agora more streets, more dati, more urban. And we pretty much elevated Oma because we were trying to really draw contrast. It's not to say that one is Japanese inspired and one is sort of Italian. They're the same vein of creativity, I guess.
Okay, lots of things to unpack there, but I guess let's start with this idea that you did want to create two spaces in one single building. And I think it's really funny because I've had this conversation with a bunch of people here in London who will be very partisan and will be like, I much prefer Oma or I much prefer Agora. They have such distinct vibes for two places that are cooking two different versions of a similar type of food and are ultimately both your babies. Why do two completely different things in one building? Why not just do the one? And also, I suppose, what's the risk in creating two different things under the one roof?
Yeah, it's a good question. And again, it's go back to that perfect storm. I think had that building not been in Borough, had that building not had the infrastructure it does, then it probably spoke a different language. But again, I sort of like the idea when you kind of go to see a building and it kind of talks to you and you're like, okay, cool. And the idea wasn't natural, huh? It was at first we were like, do we do a coffee shop downstairs? And I was like, well, that's what was there before. Really don't know how to run a coffee shop. I love coffee, don't get me wrong, but I don't really know what to do. And there's like busy for dinner and vice versa. And I think we had this sort of idea for one menu that was all these ideas, and a menu isn't a menu, it's a wish list. It's like a million things that you want to do, and you're like, hang on a minute, this doesn't translate. So then we started to divide it out. And now, to be honest with you, it's quite funny. It's like, because we've got such individual teams that run them, Julia and her team, and Felipe and Louise in the kitchen, and then upstairs Jorge with Dave. And Alessandra, for me, it's like I love them equally, but it's more about the people that now run them. That they now kind of take a steer, and they have a competitive energy. Obviously, they obviously want to be better than each other. And I ended up being a little bit of a referee, really, where it's less about my baby and it's more about their babies now because they kind of take the lead with it. And you can kind of see when they get a bit precious about somebody getting too much exposure, not each other, and it's like it's very much how to kind of to mediate that. But no, I think the building kind of spoke to us. I think getting both right was a lucky dip. I always thought we could get one right. I was like, look, 50-50 odds. We should know what we're doing by now. We should get one of them right. Two of them, well, yeah, that was a risk, to be honest with you. That was a risk for sure. Definitely lost some sleep over it. So, no, we're very fortunate they both worked. I hope they continue to work. But we've got really good teams in there now that they steer it more than I do now, to be honest with you. I mean, I help with certain decisions, but we've got a rock star team, to be honest with you. So I kind of stand back now.
How did you fall in love with restaurants in this way? You always knew that you didn't want to be in the kitchen and you knew that you wanted to be on the other side? Or how did you fall in love with this side of the industry?
It's a good question, actually. I wanted to be an architect. I still do, if I'm honest with you. I love the design process. I love the idea to the sort of curation, to then the project management, to then the delivery, to then the deliverables. And I think that's still my personality. I'm very much a project person. And I wanted to do that, but then I was a kid and I became, event catering, did bartending and waiting. It was pretty rubbish, but I kind of fell in love with that adrenaline, 8 o'clock, and all of a sudden you're just like, whoa, this is intense. And you fall in love with that high of it, really. And I guess I'm more of a dabbler than anything else, and a doer. I like to be involved in loads of things, but I never want to get sucked into too much. I don't want to be in the kitchen picking spinach. I don't want to be sort of, setting every table in your restaurant. And I want to kind of be involved in all aspects of it. But I think, again, I think it's quite a natural thing when people kind of get towards the more senior years of their career, where you kind of want to use you don't want to be always using your hands. You want to kind of start thinking about things and have all this experience, and how do you pass it on to the next generation? And I think that's sort of where I'm at, really, where it's like, how do we kind of pass this on now? I was a young guy for many years. I'm less young now. So it's sort of like, how do you pass that on experience to the other guys in the team, really? So, yeah.
But then what's, I suppose, the limitations of size? Because you run 4 sites now and there's one of you. And many people get to this point where they're like, if I grow any bigger, I won't be able to give as much attention to everything as I have done until this point. And most people tend to be perfectionists in this industry. Yeah. And so where do you draw the line? At what point does this expand? Because it's obviously a creative reward for you to come up with all these different ideas. But where do you have to stop at some point?
It's a really good question, actually. I think what happens is, again, it's sort of, if you go back to the beginning stages of, let's say, I don't know, Manteca, for example, that was all in Chris's head. That was all an idea. That was all, we woke up one morning with this idea. Then I got involved, and then obviously we started playing with the ideas together. Then it became me and him, and then designers and stuff like that, and then we delivered it. And then all of a sudden the team gets involved, and there's like 75, 80 of them in the building, and now they're the ones that do this for a living every day. So what's me or Chris going to do other than interfere? You know what I mean? And I really, really believe in management. If you have a really good management team, and if they're really, really sort of vested in you, then to be honest with you, that really is your ticket to it. And don't get me wrong, it's quite challenging in some ways. what happens, I think, it happens quite naturally where it's just a few of you involved, and all of a sudden you kind of pass on this baton, for lack of better words, where they all kind of buy into it, really believe in it, and then all of a sudden start delivering it. And then your job is just to kind of help them along the way. And then when they kind of get sort of, I guess, tripped up or whatever, then you kind of support them. But half the times they now do the same for you, if that makes any sense. Like, we come out with new ideas or whatever, they kind of deliver in equal measure in that. So I think it's a very natural thing that kind of happens. It's true though. I mean, when a site gets to a certain stage, it becomes a bit more like a dinosaur, very different operation to manage and stuff like that. And I think that's why we're now trying to form this sort of support office where we've got guys that do, one is standards and development. We've got some person who's a creative and brand, one person who is systems and processes, one person who's ops director. So all these skills that complement them, if that never challenge them, all the ones that complement them. So I think that's where it becomes really.
How do you come up with ideas for what's next? Does the idea come first and then the research trip often happens afterwards? Or do you travel, fall in love with a dish, and suddenly something starts taking form around it?
Sure. Again, it's all very accidental, to be honest with you. You see something that inspires you and you kind of work backwards from there. And again, I'm not a chef by trade, so I think perhaps how a chef by trade would probably do this is find some really good ingredients and create a dish and then work forward. I do the opposite. I find a dish that I think is amazing in some variation and I work backwards. So I knew I wanted Omar Gore to be like, to some extent, very hazy, not crystal clear for sure, and then work backwards from that, whether it was menu, whether it was design, whether it was vibe, whether it was systems, whatever it was. And I've always been like, that's what we want to deliver. And I don't have a clue how to create it. But then enough sort of, I guess, I don't know, enough love, I guess, enough passion, I don't know what to call it, like enough sort of work at it, you work backwards. But I think some people probably do the opposite. They create a dish and this is amazing, and then you work forwards with it. I'm the opposite. I think something that's really, really amazing and that's really, really cool, and you work backwards. And I think it's more so what you see and what you think inspires you to kind of work backwards from there, really. I worked for Japanese route for many years, so I've always wanted to do something sort of that style. I don't have a clue what it was. I was in Japan last year. I'm there again in November. So maybe something will come from it, but maybe it won't. Last time nothing came of it. I was like, damn, I came all this way and like all of a sudden like the restaurants are amazing, but they don't translate. They're so good in Japan. I'm going to bastardize them. Like, no, leave them here. So nothing really came of it, annoyingly, which was fine, to be fair. I really enjoyed it. And maybe nothing ever does come from it. That's cool as well. I've still enjoyed my trips, don't get me wrong. But yeah, I think it's the more you see something along the way and then you're like, yeah, that's pretty cool.
That was David Carter in conversation with me at Midori House. This is The Menu. In a context where divisions can seem insurmountable, a Palestinian and an Israeli restaurateur have come together to run one of Berlin's most delicious Middle Eastern restaurants. Jalil Debit and Oz Ben David opened Kanaan in 2015 in Berlin. Other than employing both Jewish and Muslim staff, the team consists of a variety of people from all walks of life, all working together, serving modern interpretations of Levantine food and probably the best hummus in Berlin. Sachin Obaid met with co-owner Oz Ben David at the site in the German capital to find out more about the restaurant's beginnings and its remarkable ethos.
In the vibrant heart of Berlin, there exists a culinary gem that transcends borders and brings together people through the shared language of food. Founded in 2015 by Oz Ben David, an Israeli, and Jalil Debit, a Palestinian, Kanaan is a restaurant nestled in the Prenzlauer district, operating under the ethos that breaking bread together can be a powerful catalyst for understanding and unity. The restaurant serves as a living example of the idea that people from different backgrounds can come together, appreciate each other's differences, and create something beautiful. In a world that sometimes feels fragmented, Kanaan stands as a beacon of hope, proving that collaboration, friendship, and the joy of shared meals can transcend political and cultural boundaries.
Kanaan was a business from the first step. We never sit, Jalil and me, and were saying, okay, we want to change the world. We wanted to make business. It was a cold business decision to start working together. In the beginning, we didn't even want to put a political title. It was Kanaan, vegan, vegetarian. That's it. With time, with like long perspective, I can tell you that there was some magic that happened in the moment. I'm always saying that the mission and the political aspect in a way is choosing us, and we never chose that.
As much as Oz and Jalil wanted to operate a restaurant focused on serving the best dishes and looking at their bottom line, they knew very quickly this would not be possible. Their partnership became a symbol of something much more, and the restaurant became one with a mission and purpose.
Kanaan, from her first day, we're hearing what is impossible, like Israeli and Palestinian, it's impossible, this is impossible. And also with the worker, we really wanted to work I'm taking you back 8.5 years. It's the beginning of the immigrations of Syrian refugees to Germany, the peak of that time. And I'm saying to Jalil, I want to work with the refugees from Syria. That was the first time we had to ask ourselves what we're willing to do. And then we created this ad publicity in this newspaper. And we wrote like, if you know how to make hummus, we will pay you like the chefs of Team Rao.
Kanaan is famous for their hummus. It's the first dish Oz and Jalil wanted on the menu. And their ability to decide on the recipe tested their partnership early on. And in many ways laid the foundation for the type of food they wanted to serve.
Hummus. Who it belongs to, Israelis, Palestinian, who made it first? That's the first question we had to deal with, like how are we going to solve that and how are we going to make hummus? There is so many ways to make hummus. How are we going to do that? Jalil, coming from a family that they making in Palestine hummus for 300 years. Like they have a documents that his grandfather used to make for the Uthmans, Turkish, and Jalil himself making since he's 12 already. His father teach him how to make hummus. So imagine this situation that we meet and I tell him like, I don't care about your 300 years of experience. I don't serve this kind of hummus. What Jalil did in that moment were teaching us in the future how we can make any recipe. Basically, Jalil said, okay, I'm not putting ego on the table. We are here to build now a recipe. I don't care. Show me how you make your hummus. Show me all the best, all the secrets. And then I will show you all my secrets. Now it's a recipe of a family hummus. We're taking it very serious. I did like few elements that my grandmother doing in the recipe. And then he took some elements from his recipe. And I swear, I was telling him it will not work. It will not make a good hummus. I'm telling you, it will not make. And he told me, let's try what there is a risk. Let's match those recipes together. Take the best of what you think is important in your hummus, what's important in my hummus, and that created the magical hummus that we serve for 9 years. And since then, everything is about that. It's about to take the Israeli best recipes and the stories and the way that my family used to make it and combine it with Jalil family history of how he making it. And what happened here in the restaurant is that it's getting another adaptation to the local, to the German. One of the most famous dishes was hummus, kartoffelpuffer. Hummus of Jalil, kartoffelpuffer of the local, and chopped Israeli salad coming together. And you're telling yourself, you know what? Like kartoffelpuffer with hummus, with salad, one of our best sellers. Tabbouleh salad, everybody knows, right? But we took the tabbouleh, we don't change anything. We take the best, all the elements that are part of tabbouleh and what's make tabbouleh tabbouleh. And then we add Israeli avocado on top to create like kind of creaminess. So the sourness is not kicking you too strong in the... And then on top of that, we're taking the local forest fruits, berries, blueberries, and we spread them in the tabbouleh. So you get like juices of sour, sweet with the avocado that we had. And we take the tabbouleh and we made something new out of it. Israeli, Palestinian, German. And what we're trying to say to our guests here, to people that are reading our books, and that it's great that you have something that it's your legacy and how it used to be in the past, and we don't need to throw everything away and build something totally new. We need to take the best of that and to create something new. And by giving that a chance, it's allowing you to enjoy a new experience, to go and move with the time and the changes and create new exciting things. From that, you can understand that also when we talk about political aspect, the idea of Israeli, Palestinian coming together, even that it doesn't sound like it can ever happen really, especially these days that we are living now. We asking people to dare more, to try more, to be more brave. And the food is our way to express that.
Sachin Obaid there, speaking to Oz Ben David of Kanaan in Berlin. This is The Menu. Now it's time for the week's top food and drink headlines. Here is Monocle's Monica Lillis.
South Korea's central bank announced on Thursday that it will allow the production of savoury treats shaped like the 10-won coin, commonly known as sibwonpang. The much-loved bread snack, filled with cheese, has long been popular in the country. However, the Bank of Korea forbade the production of them due to a clause prohibiting the commercial use of the coin's design. This led to a copyright dispute and prompted significant backlash from the public. The hope is that the relaxed regulation will foster innovative economic activities and strengthen the grassroots economy. According to new figures gathered by the Office of National Statistics in the UK, the British culinary staple fish and chips is the takeaway that is increasing in price the quickest. The average cost of the traditional cod and chips around the country is almost £10, up more than 50% since 2019, when the average price was £6.48. The ONS have partially attributed the price rises to soaring costs of potatoes and fish, brought about by climate change and war in Ukraine. This week saw the return of the annual La Tomatina festival to the streets of Monocle in eastern Spain. Dedicated to the town's and indeed the country's love of the red fruit, revellers joined the so-called world's biggest food fight, and over 22,000 attendees pelted each other with the squishy tomatoes for 1 hour. 7 trucks distributed 150 tonnes of the foodstuff to eager roisterers, and the streets were awash with the scarlet pulp. Not to worry though, a team of cleaners were armed with water hoses to wash away the refuse. Those are the week's food and drink headlines. Now back to Chiara.
Thanks, Monica. You're listening to The Menu. And finally, it's the last Friday of the month, so we're joined by Monocle's sub-editor and in-house wine expert Chloé Lake for her pick of Wine of the Month. This week, we're heading to Japan to try Chateau Mercian Koshu Gris de Gris 2021. Chloé, a delight as ever to have you in the studio. I think today's going to be an interesting one. I'm very intrigued. Even just by looking at the label, I know that we're looking at something quite special. Yeah, where are you taking us?
I am very excited for today's episode, I have to say. We are going to Japan, which is very unusual, off the beaten track, not somewhere that you think of when you think of wine. I don't know about you, but I always think of sake, maybe whiskey. So yeah, really excited to crack it open today.
Well, I think it's a very interesting choice from you because so far we've had some of the great big players in the winemaking world. We've gone to France, we've gone to Italy, we've gone to Australia. And this is a bit more of a left field choice from you. As you say, Japan probably not very well known for its wine production, at least internationally. So what is happening in the country? Has there not been a great winemaking tradition up until now? Is there a sort of new wave of producers coming through? Tell us about it.
Yeah, great questions. I mean, I will start with the disclaimer that I am by no means an expert on Japanese wine. I'm very new to it as well. And I actually discovered it a few months ago. I went to this little wine bar in Elephant and Castle in London called Diogenes the Dog. And they had this one wine from Japan on their menu. And I thought, how unusual. I'm going to give it a go. And it was just super lovely, delicate, very expressive. But yeah, as you say, Japan is kind of coming into it recently in the wine world. Grapes were never really indigenous to Japan like they were in Europe. And it's thought that they came about 2,000 years ago and the trade routes were opened and they were slowly introduced. And the grape that we'll be having today is currently indigenous to Japan, but people think it's a hybrid mixture of something from Europe and something from Asia. So it's kind of settling into its rhythm as its own wine country at the moment, I think. And lots of exciting things to come for sure.
Well, what about the taste and why you chose this specific bottle? It is the end of summer, at least here in the Northern Hemisphere. So I suppose what in this wine makes you think of this particular time of year?
I think, it's very delicate. We're going into a time of year that's all about transition. And I think this says that on the palate. It's an elegant wine. It's not too robust. It's got a nice level of acidity. It's just a nice thing to ease you into the new season, I think, as we kind of go into autumn. And it's an orange wine, something that we haven't really explored as of yet. So,
oh, wow. You kept that
I did.
quiet
I kept
for
that
a
quiet.
while. I was completely convinced that it was a white, but lo and behold, our first orange. So surely we should do a bit of an intro to how you feel about orange wines. Of course, not quite as uncommon on menus as they might have been even just 5 years ago. But how do you feel about an orange?
I am a big fan of an orange wine. Personally, you can get so many different types. I mean, there's kind of more funky varieties. There's more traditional classic ones that might be closer to white, which I think is something that we'll have today. But yeah, there's a real range, I think, and they're always fun and different to try. So yeah, big fan personally.
Well, shall we ease into the new season and have a bit of a taste?
Yeah, absolutely. So this wine as well is from the oldest established winery in Japan. So that started out in 1870. And the people who started it, their descendants are still working there today. So it's quite a nice little story of how that came about.
Quite a classic kind of Japanese family history type of story. So
absolutely.
many businesses in the country operate in that way. But I have to say, I'm surprised that the winemaking tradition goes back that long.
It does, yeah. And where this comes from, basically the prefecture took the name of a Japanese prince and became Yamanashi. And that's where a lot of the fruit grows today in Japan. It's kind of their fruit basin, as you were. And I was speaking to a colleague earlier whose relatives are from Japan, and he was saying they have a huge gifting culture of giving oranges and particularly grapes from this region to each other when they meet. So it's kind of interesting that we're sampling something from this fruit bowl.
It really is a gift, and it is so fruity on the nose. I have to say,
let's have a smell.
this is stunning, but it's almost like a candy.
Yeah. Oh, I think this smells gorgeous.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, this is great. It kind of smells like apricots a bit to me. Very nice and fruit forward, I think.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. It's a fruit basket, but nicely wrapped up with ribbons, Japanese style.
Yeah, absolutely. And these grapes are absolutely beautiful. If you go on Google Images and type in koshu, they're like blush pink, kind of the cherry blossom of the grape world. So that's also very exciting.
It feels fitting for what we're smelling. Shall we give it a taste?
Yes, absolutely.
So I think that's really interesting because obviously it's still fruity and floral, but nowhere near as sweet as I thought it would be.
Yeah, well, great that you point that out because this wine, so as we mentioned, it's an orange wine. It spends 3 weeks on skins. Normally when white wines are made, they are pressed and the skins are separated from the juice. But these are left in contact with the exterior of the grape. So you kind of get a bit more of that full-bodied tannic experience. A lot of people say there's no tannins in white wine, but actually you can get it. It's orange wine, basically. So yeah, that might be where you're kind of getting a little bit more of this.
It's also very clean, though. Lots of the orange wine, at least the kind of first-generation orange wine that I'm used to drinking, is on the funkier end of the scale. This is almost... It's almost dessert wine-like, even though it's not sweet, if that makes sense. It's very clean, but it has a real personality.
Yes, absolutely. I think a lot of the, I guess as you'd say, funkier orange wines often are not filtered. So you get a little bit of kind of residual must in there, I guess. And then I'm not sure if this has been filtered or not. I haven't actually looked, but yeah, it's quite clean tasting.
The name of the wine, Gris de Gris, obviously feels quite French to me. So do you think that there is a sort of French influence into the way that Japan has taken to making wine?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, because it's a newer wine producing country as well, I think obviously they've been influenced from somewhere. So yeah, absolutely. And Gris de Gris is interesting. So it means basically a white that's produced from a red grape, I think, but it's not sort of pigmented enough to be a rosé. So that like pink grape that we were discussing before creates this lovely sort of white orange wine.
How do you stand on sake? Do you ever dabble in the sake? Speaking of Japanese productions.
I really love it. I don't know much about it. I just think it tastes so nice. I went out not long ago and had a really great bowl of ramen and had this yuzu sake with it, and it was revolutionary. And I've since been stocking my cupboards with yuzu sake, so I'm a big fan.
So, well, then maybe next time we'll get you to try a sommelier course for sake and branch out to sake of the month.
Yeah, I think we could do that.
Looking forward to that. Well, thank you so much for bringing in this absolutely joyful basket full of floral and fruity scents today.
Thank you. I absolutely loved it. It was great fun.
Thanks, Chloe. And that's all for this edition of The Menu. Remember that we are back with a new episode again on Friday at 2000 London time. That's at midday in San Francisco. Also, don't forget to tune into our spin-off show Food Neighborhoods for a tour of some of the world's tastiest destinations. I am Chiara Rimella. This programme was produced by Monica Lillis and our sound engineers were Mariella Bevan, Flynn Simons and Sarah Nichol. Thanks for listening and until next week.
When it comes to voicing or acting on our opinions, why are some of us more confident than others? Financial Times readers think fearlessly because they're supported by bold and trusted journalism. Start reading today and bring well-informed ideas to the table, from the latest on the pleasures of food to sustainable farming and the future of wine. Start reading the Financial Times at ft.com.